Okay, Zev, we're continuing on in Avodah Zarah, Perek Daled, Mishnah Ches. As I indicated at the end of the last Mishnah, from this Mishnah on until the end of the Mishnayos discuss the halachas of Yain Nesech. Yain Nesech is wine that is poured specifically as a libation for Avodah Zarah. It's a tikroives Avodah Zarah. Yain Nesach is also behana completely. Yain Nesach is prohibited for any and all benefit. And this, we recall, we learned in Perek Beis of Avodah Zarah, Mishnah Gimel, where the Mishnah there lists Elu dvorim shelo yivdek chovim asuran, Elu dvorim shelo yivdek chovim asurin v'yisuran isurano. The very first item on the list was Hayayin, Yain Nesach. And Yain Nesach is also midoraisa. Now the Chachamim extended this issur to include any wine that belongs to an idolater, even if it is even where it is not known that it was taka used as a libation for tikroivis avodah zarah. Now the Chachamim also decreed that even a Jew's wine becomes asur if an idolater touches it in certain ways, because of the strong suspicion that the Chazal had that he touches it in order to perform a libation. Now, we have Yain Nesech, which is used as tikroivis avodah zarah. We also, however, have an extension of this, and that is that when the Chachamim extended the issur of Yain Nesach to include any wine that belongs to an idolater, even if it is not known that it was used for a libation, that is to say, any goyish wine that you would go to a store and buy today, any bottle of wine you find in a wine liquor store that is not kosher wine, that is not certified kosher wine. So what is that wine? That wine is not being used for tikroivis avodah zarah. It's not yain nesech. That is what we refer to today in halachic parlance as stam yenam. Stam yenam, ordinary wine of a goy. Now, although there is much less reason to assume that this stam yenam, that this ordinary wine, was used for a libation, most probably it was not at all, not even considered for it. It's commercial goyish wine. The Chachamim, however, prohibited the use of stam yenam in order to prevent socialization with goyim that might chas v'sholom lead to intermarriage. That might chas v'sholom lead to intermarriage. Now, when I said the last point that the Chachamim also decreed that even a Jew's wine becomes prohibited if an idolater touches it in certain ways because of the strong suspicion that he touches it in order to perform a libation, here we must also add that technically a libation, nisu chayayin, means pouring wine as an offering as it was done, lahavdil elef havdolas, as it was done in the Beis Hamikdash, as it was done in the Holy Temple, where there was nisu chayayin al gabe hamizbeach, where there were wine libations poured into a special bowl that was placed at the corner of the mizbeach. Sometimes idolaters would make a token libation by shaking the wine or stirring it with their finger, and these kind of actions also forbid the wine as nesech. And therefore, if an idolater pours a Jew's wine or touched it in any of these ways, again, we must suspect that he meant to perform a libation with it, and the wine therefore becomes also behano. That's the general introduction. So the prohibition of yain nesech applies also to grape juice, but only if it reached a certain point in its production where it can already be called wine. Now this Mishnah will define this point. This is where we begin. The Mishnah says, Loikchin gas beuta min oivet kechovim. We may buy the crushed grapes of a wine press from an idolater, even though he crushed them with his feet, which was the way that wine was produced in the days of old. To explain a little bit better, in the times of the Mishnah, wine was produced in a wine press consisting of a section of thick wooden planks that were placed at an incline with a flat area at the top of these planks and a cistern at the bottom. So what would happen? The grapes would first be crushed by foot on the planks, and their juice would run down the boards and drain into a cistern located in the ground just in front of the press. I'm going to WhatsApp to you a picture of this to make it very clear. Now, a strainer was hung on the pipe leading from the bottom of the press to the cistern. For what? To filter out the grape skins, to filter out the seeds and other waste materials from the grapes. So the crushed grapes would then be gathered and piled in a mound on the flat area at the top of the incline. I'll repeat. The crushed grapes would then be gathered and piled in a mound on the flat area at the top of the incline. For this reason, the flat area was called in the Mishnah as tapuach, as a tapuach. It's a mound. Now, the weight of the mound caused more juice to come down out of the crushed grapes and flow down the incline into the cistern. And finally, a heavy beam would be placed on top of the mound to force out the remaining liquid. That's a very important piece of explanation. I'll send you the picture as well, and you can review this once or twice in order to get it clear as to what the Mishnah is discussing now and subsequently. So again, loikchin gas beuta min oivet kechovim. We may buy the crushed grapes of a wine press from an idolater, even though he crushed them with his feet. Af al pi shehu noitel biyodoi v'noisel latapuach. And even though he actually takes the crushed grapes from the juice with his hand and places them on the mound. The mound is the flat area at the top of the wine press, so that they will continue to drain. Why? Why can you do that? Afal pishu noitel biyodov noitel latapuach. Why can you do that? Why can you do that? Why loik chingas beutamina evet kachovim? Even though he's taking it biyodov noitel latapuach? Says the Mishnah, because ve'einoi nase yain nesech at sheyered labo. Because it does not attain the name of yain, it does not become subject to the laws of yain nesech until it flows down into the cistern at the bottom of the wine press, because only then is the juice considered wine. Only then does it get a chaloit shem of yain. I must make a parenthetical remark that this is only according to the Mishnah Rishoina. We don't paskin like this. But according to this Mishnah Rishoina, the wine does not become wine, it does not get a chaloit shem of yain until Yered Labor, until it goes actually into the cistern, which is at the bottom of the wine press. It's at the bottom of the wine press. This is a special stringency in regard to the law of Yain Nesech. In regard to other matters, even the juice in the cistern is not considered wine until a later stage. We'll see. Says the Mishnah, Yorad Labo, but once the juice has flowed down into the cistern, Mashe Beboir Osur, that which is in the cistern is now also if the goy touched it, because it is now wine. V'ashar mutar, and the remainder. What's the remainder? The juice remaining in the wine press that has not as yet flowed into the cistern is mutar, is permitted for drinking, even if the idolater touched it, because what he touched is not yain. What he touched is not considered wine. Now, the Gemara explains that the ruling of our Mishnah, which I just made reference to, it's a very, very important yisoid in all of Yilchos Yain Nesech. The Gemara says that the ruling of our Mishnah follows the Chachamim's original view, their original thinking. That's what this Mishnah is. It's their first thought. The juice is not classified as yain until it flows into the cistern. Later, however, the Gemara tells us the Chachamim retracted this ruling and taught that as soon as the juice begins to flow away from the grapes, even while it is still in the wine press, it is already classified as yain. It is already wine and already can become osur as yain nesech if an idolater touches it. And this is the halacha lemaise. The halacha lemaise is that as soon as the grapes begin to, as soon as the juice from the grapes begins to flow away from the grapes, even while it is still in the wine press and has not as yet reached the cistern, as was thought in the beginning of the Mishnah, as was thought by Mishnah Rishoina. As soon as the juice begins to flow from the grapes, it is already considered yain nesech. I wanted to look at this very important Rav, who summarizes this. The Rav, which under the heading Afal Pishu Noitel Biyodo, Afal Pishu Noitel Biyodo Anovi B'Toch Hayayin, V'Noitim B'Tapuach, which is Makoy Masifas Anovim, or also it can mean Gal Koroi Tapuach. Now it says the Rav. Now listen carefully. V'Sovar Tona Didon. Our Mishnah, our Tana in this Mishnah is of the opinion De'eino nase yain nesach at sheyered laboil. The Mishnah Rishonov, which is stated in our Mishnah here, is of the opinion that it does not attain the Chaloi Shem of Yain Nesach until it goes into the bowl, until it goes into the cistern. As it flows through, as it goes through, it is not yet Yain Nesach. You can drink it, even if the guy touches it. Says the Rav, V'zu, picking up on the Gemara, V'zu Mishnah Rishona hi, ve'in halacha. This is Mishnah Rishona, but this is not the halacha lemaise. What is the halacha lemaise? The halacha lemaise is ella, but keva shehischil hayayin li'imoshech. Once the juice begins to flow, nase yayin nesech. It then becomes yayin nesech. This is a very important yesod, because if one just learns this Mishnah, one can walk away with the impression that yayin nesech does not become yayin nesech, that the juice flowing from the grape does not become yayin nesech until it goes into the cistern. That is not the halacha l'maaseh. The halacha l'maaseh is that once the process begins, once it begins to flow, then it gets the chaloi shem of yayin nesech.